Hi, my name is George Gustines, and I write about comics for the New York Times. I want to thank everybody for their time today. We're discussing an important topic, suicide prevention among members of the military, and different ways to draw awareness to that, including the use of comic books. Joining us today are Paul Allor, the writer of the current G.I Joe series, Michael Kelly, the Vice President of Publishing at Hasbro, Patricia Watson, who is in the Department of Veteran Affairs, Duane France, a Sergeant First Class with the Army, and Tom Waltz, a senior editor and writer with IDW and a former Marine, which I learned this time. Thank you all for being here. I think Patricia and Duane, from the material I read, perhaps you can start us off and tell us about Suicide Prevention Month and the Governor's Challenge.
Duane, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So as many people know, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and I personally am involved with an effort that's a joint effort between the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs, a couple of other national organizations called the Governor's Challenge. Now, SAMHSA and VA for a long time have teamed up to provide technical support for communities that are attempting to address military and veteran suicide in their communities, called the Mayor's Challenge. Last year, they've started at the state level with the Governor's Challenge. Where I'm currently at, Colorado was one of the first 7 states to be able to participate in the Governor's Challenge, and I believe we're up to almost 20 states. And so what happens is the state will actually convene a team that will receive technical assistance and ongoing support from the Department of Veterans Affairs and SAMHSA's Service Members Veteran Military Family Technical Assistance Center. And the goal of this is to be able to take what we know works at the national level when it comes to suicide prevention, coordinate it with resources that are usually available at the state level, at least coordinated at the state level, and then really tailored to specific communities within the state. And a lot of it is to be able to share best practices, what's working in different states, what may be common from among the states, and then what is really different with each of the states and each of the communities within the states.
And I think you said it perfectly. All I would add was that would be to say that from the work that I've done at the National Center for PTSD, we've seen that it's really, really important for more local initiatives, local, state, communities coming together to tackle things like this, because when people can do these things locally, it makes a huge difference as to how received people feel. A lot of people feel overwhelmed by a large VA system or a large SAMHSA system, but if they know that people are coming together locally to try to put their heads together from different initiatives, from different types of programs, then they feel like they have a voice and they feel like the program really represents what their needs are. So I'm so excited about this program.
That's really great. Michael, Paul, and Tom, I want to talk about G.I. Joe #7 specifically, but can you tell us what inspired this new take on the series? I think the short version is that Cobra controls a lot of the country now, and some new Joes are rising up to fight.
Yeah, we decided a couple of years ago that it was time to reboot G.I. Joe and try a different storyline. And as I was talking to the editors over at IDW, one of the thoughts that I had was I had been doing some studying about World War II, and something that fascinated me was the Special Operations Executive, which was basically civilians that were put into dropped behind enemy lines, and they were trained in espionage and sabotage and things of that nature. And I thought it would be really interesting to try a different take on G.I. Joe, so that instead of being the elite American fighting force, it was made up of a combination of military units, but also civilians, and what that would be like in an occupied territory. And I pitched that over to IDW, and we talked about it quite a lot. And then they brought Paul on board, and he ran with it, and really exceeded even my wildest expectations. So it was just an amazing thing.
What has the reception been? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to cut in. When Michael pitched the idea, I remember thinking, because I actually don't edit this one, but I edit the kind of the traditional G.I Joe Real American Hero line, which it like Michael says is fairly more straightforward story wise and as far as the military action is concerned. So when Michael brought it to us, I thought I really like this idea, but I didn't know how in the world we'd make it work, because I was thinking traditional G.I Joe, and characters have their names, their code names, and their costumes, and it's very specific to different branches of the military and different military jobs. So I thought, this is a great idea. I have no clue how anybody's going to pull this off. So just to reiterate what Michael said, when Paul started writing, and I said, oh, now I see how this could work. And actually, like Michael said, it exceeded my expectations by far, because I just, as a writer myself, I thought, I don't know how this will work with these characters, and Paul made it work.
Well, I had basically the same thing. I thought, I really like this idea. I also had no idea how anyone would make it work. So I'm glad to hear that we managed to do that, myself and Chris Avenhouse and Brittany Peer, the team on the book.
What was your first breakthrough? I mean, did you come up with a civilian character and that helped you get into the storyline?
A lot of it was just researching the World War II background that Michael spoke of. I did a massive amount of research in that, and I kind of paired that together with the idea that that warfare these days is increasingly asymmetrical, and realized that concept of the civilian force actually tied in really well to that idea of asymmetrical warfare, and of smaller groups going up against very large, massive armies. So kind of making that connection sort of gave me the plot angle. But then, like you said, yeah, a lot of it was just developing the characters, and both repurposing some of the older characters in new ways while also bringing in new characters that kind of helped me to piece it together and go from there. So yeah, it was definitely a very interesting and fun challenge.
It's been a terrific series. I always feel bad confessing this, but it's the first time I've read G.I. Joe on a regular basis. I saw the cartoons as a kid, but this is the first time that I've been reading the comic month to month. I love it. It's been really great. How did the story for issue number 7 come about? Because that's key here. And I know Scarlett was dealing with mental health and post-traumatic stress disorder in that issue.
Yeah, I actually had the idea for issue 7, not knowing it would be issue 7, of course, but just had the idea for doing this type of story pretty much from when I was laying the groundwork for the series early on. And really that allowed me to do the research for this issue in the background while I was working on issues 1 through 6. So it was a really long road to get here, because I did realize that if I was going to try to tell this story, and especially tell it in 20 pages of comic book, which is not a lot of storytelling space, that I really wanted to make sure to get it right, and to honor those who have served and who have been through these issues, and to not do something that was, melodramatic or maudlin in sort of a very fictional seeming way, or that kind of a thing, that was something that fit into the overall G.I. Joe story we were telling, but also had a sense of verisimilitude to it that these stories often don't have. So, but yeah, and I gotta say that IDW and Hasbro are both just so wildly supportive of this from the beginning. Because honestly, like, I didn't know if it would fly, and it was never an issue. They were fantastic. I think they saw the importance of dealing with this kind of thing, and to use the property of G.I. Joe that's such a major pop culture icon of the last century in a responsible way.
That's great. I mean, it's obviously such a sensitive topic and something that needs to be presented with care. Patricia and Duane, I think you consulted on this issue. Have you done that type of work for entertainment before? And can you tell us what you brought to this?
I have not done that kind of work for entertainment before. Some of my colleagues at the National Center for PTSD have, but I have not. And I had no idea what to expect, but I was incredibly impressed with the way that Paul wrote this storyline. I was expecting to have to make more commentary on it, but in the end, I really didn't have to do much. I think I tried to add in a little bit about, the way that Duke might talk to her about motivating her to get treatment by saying, you know, if your car's going to stop running, wouldn't you take it to a mechanic? If you twisted your ankle, wouldn't you go to a doctor? Because I know about stigma and how hard it is sometimes to get military service members and veterans into treatment. We added a little bit about, you know, the specifics that might happen in a treatment. And I think that, you know, I was trying to really highlight also the importance of social support within the group to make sure that Scarlett had more than one person who she felt connected to, and that there might be some explanation of the suddenness of what happened with the suicide. You know, that it didn't, you know, that somebody would know that something was going on that contributed to it, so it wouldn't just be out of the blue. And then I think that you know, the focus also was, you know, just trying to very simply describe, you know, how she was feeling as she was going through treatment. One of the things that was so impressive to me about the way Paul wrote this was exactly what he said. It wasn't melodramatic. It was very much like the way I've heard service members and veterans talking about both getting into treatment and being in treatment and, you know, getting through the process. And he didn't embellish it too much. He was just like right on point, I felt. And I liked the focus on the fact that it was a process. You know, she wasn't going to get better right away. There were going to be ups and downs, and people have reminders and things that trigger them. And she found a way to get to a place in the story where she was at least feeling like I'm having progress. I'm tackling this a little bit at a time. And I felt like that was so realistic and well done. Well done. So I'm happy to have this opportunity to say that to you in person.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And also, I mean, just the consultants were just so fantastic and brought so much to the issue. And also, I think, acknowledged and respected the idea that we were trying to tell a story in which people weren't perfect. Because honestly, it was kind of a fear of mine when I first reached out to Patricia and to Duane, that I was worried they would kind of try to make it seem more like a technical manual, you know, because like Duke makes mistakes in the story. Scarlett makes obviously very big mistakes in the story. But no, there was none of that. I think they very much understood what we were doing from the beginning, and, you know, just like met us in terms of, you know, gave us notes on the book we were trying to tell, rather than trying to like say maybe it should be something over here instead. So, and that was I really appreciate it. It really just their notes just strengthened the story so tremendously.
And for my part, like Patricia, I hadn't consulted like this before, which really isn't surprising, because a lot of times when maybe the media or especially in this case, comic books or even print, they try to do it on their own, right? Many people think that because I have a car, I know how to drive, because I have a brain, I understand mental health kind of thing. And so definitely it felt a little bit, you know, maybe not to this extent, but, you know, for Band of Brothers, they had Dale Dye come in to make sure that everybody's ribbons were correct and that we were actually showing the right story. And so as a clinical mental health counselor myself, but also as a combat veteran, was able to give some different pointers and some different, you know, maybe you would say this instead of that, or that's not typically something that that someone would say in this situation. But also really sort of just the way that visually it was presented. The things like, you know, Scarlett using her flak vest as a weighted blanket is again sort of a typical kind of thing that I know veterans might do, and they might hold on to their former military. I mean, even in the first couple of pages, some of what Scarlett says about wishing she wouldn't have come back and she would have been made a hero, it could have been taken verbatim from some of the clients that I see. I mean, I think that even at the point where I got the script, it was obvious that so much research had gone into it that really it was more on, you know, hey, this hits absolutely the majority of the right notes, and there were some things that could be improved, and I really appreciate Hasbro and IDW for reaching out and wanting to make sure that this is done in the right way.
That's great. Paul, did you base Scarlett's story on anyone in particular, or was it sort of just like a composite of all the research that you had done in this topic?
It was a composite of a lot of the research. I read a lot of oral histories and interviews with folks who have been through this, and I did sort of pick up like little pieces here and there, but while being careful not to like, ever like directly lift anyone's anecdote, because I thought that would feel disrespectful. So yeah, it was a composite while also trying to make sure that like, actually I very much being careful not to base it on any one person in particular.
Mhm.
And was there a moment in writing where you thought you should run this by like experts just to make sure that you have it correct?
Yeah, that was pretty much every moment during writing it. I was terrified about this issue, right up until people from the military community started to read it and say, okay, you did all right here, and that's when I felt like I could breathe a little bit again.
That's great. And Michael and Tom, was there any hesitation in using the G.I Joe characters in this way? I can sort of imagine that some cranks on Twitter might say that comics are for kids, they should be entertaining. This is too far afield for what they consider their G.I Joe.
Yeah, I think, I do think that that's a risk that you take whenever you explore a complex issue in something like a comic book. But I also think that the way Paul had been telling the story up till this point, it provided an insight into the stress and the anxieties of what it would be like to be a civilian or a military personnel in this crazy occupied territory and trying to experience and survive that type of a world. And I think because of that, when we got to 7, it felt like it fit. It felt like this is appropriate for the story that we're telling. I think that when we first got Paul's pitch, and that's over a year ago now, certainly there was a little bit of hesitation for the same reasons that Paul mentions. You have to make sure you're going to do it right. You have to make sure that it's sensitive, that it's accurate. And, basically I went back and said, we're going to need to bring in some experts on this. And of course, Paul had already beaten me to the punch. He was like, oh yeah, I got them all lined up and we're ready to go. So, I think that really helped us feel that we were doing the right thing and that it was appropriate to the story. And, I do think also that to an extent, as brand owners and as storytellers that have this kind of reach and influence, we do have a bit of a responsibility to tell stories of this nature and to try and reach people who, maybe might not be reached in other ways. You never know what might be the touch point that hits somebody the right way. And I think that gave us the drive to make sure that we did it right and to move forward and to not really worry too much about whether a few people might think that we had done something inappropriate with their version of the brand, or however they might view it, because I think it's totally appropriate. If you're going to tell the story of soldiers, if you're going to tell the story of people in harm's way, you have to tell those stories the way that they actually happen.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that you bring up Twitter and just social media in general, and Michael and Paul will attest to this. Usually the experts on the internet are the ones that aren't actually reading the comic or the whatever they're critiquing or have decided what it means or what it doesn't mean. A perfect example would be the main line, the main G.I Joe Real American Hero, which is written by Larry Hama. And Larry's been writing it since the 80s. And Larry's a Vietnam vet, war hero, tunnel rat. And he has, over the years, presented a very diverse cast of characters, has presented very intense social, I guess the term nowadays is the social justice type of narrative, as well as presenting PTSD from a very personal perspective, both his own and people that he served with or has known over the years. And I think like Michael says, we've always approached G.I. Joe in the years I've been on it, and I know before that, in a way that's non-pandering. And because that's what I always worry about. And so usually we're getting accused of pandering when that's the last thing we're doing, because we never do that. Everything is well thought out. Just like Paul's story, the G.I. Joe stories, the more mainline military action always is well thought out. There's always true consequences, and there's always true storytelling. And one of the things about PTSD that's always been interesting to me is the stereotype is shell shock. That people think, oh, you're gonna hear loud noises or you hear fireworks, and that's the thing that's gonna drive you nuts. And it's not always that. That can be part of it. There's a huge component of this, in my experience, in the military, and I've done both the Marines, and I was an MP in the National Guard for 5 years, is survivor's guilt is a huge part of it. There's also, there's an actor named Adam Driver, who we all know is Kylo Ren, who was a Marine, and he talks about the kind of PTSD that he suffered is guilt for not being able to deploy, that he was hurt and his unit went. And so my own personal experience is, I was in Desert Storm in the Marines. So sometimes the hardest thing for me was we were over there for a year living in tents and out in the desert in the middle of nowhere. And then when it was over, literally overnight, after doing that for a year, we got on a plane and we stepped off a plane in San Bernardino in the winter, and they said, all right, see you at work tomorrow. And there's just there was no adjustment at the time. I think, the PTSD understanding was in kind of its infancy, I think then, at least the idea that maybe we need to treat this. And we literally went back to Camp Pendleton, and I had to get in my normal green uniform, my utilities, and be at work the next day. And that was it, and then there's a lot of people, and it was funny because there was a kind of weirdness with the people who never went, the people who had stayed behind, because even amongst Marines, we weren't simpatico at that point. And there's a weird adjustment, but like with the National Guard, I got diagnosed with, we were getting ready to go over in 9/11 for it was gonna be my trip back to the desert, and I got diagnosed with high blood pressure. And they wouldn't let me go because I needed to get some stuff taken care of. And then when President Bush said mission accomplished, which it really wasn't, all the people who were on stop loss at that point, they started letting them go, and I was on stop loss. And so they medically discharged me, and I had a friend that was actually in my squad who went over there and got killed in Abu Ghraib. And those are things that you kind of live with. And then it's tough because you think, well, what if I was there? That was my team, and I could have helped maybe. And it's not always things like explosions that take you back. I know everybody who's been in the military will say this. Every time I smell diesel fuel, every time I smell a truck with diesel, it just makes you think of it. And it's not always in a negative way, but there's just certain triggers. And I thought Paul's story did a really good job of showing that PTSD it's nuanced, and it's not always the thing that Hollywood presents it as, where, there is the dumpster slamming that'll scare you, but there's also the smell of a certain type of fuel that'll take you back. And it's important, I think, to understand the varieties and the way people the things people are dealing with.
Patricia and Duane, I'm at sea here. I don't know enough about this area, but I mean, everything that was just shared, it just sounds like, is there any help for soldiers when they come back to get reacclimated to like everyday life? It just seems like it's so much to get over, and then you're expected to just go back to normal.
Right. I mean, certainly I think people are more and more aware of that, the importance of that transition between, facing things that are really out of the norm and potentially traumatic, and then coming back to quote unquote a normal life. But I've also seen in many of the bases and places that I've worked that they know the right thing. They know the thing that would be most helpful. They plan for it, but then it doesn't become available at the exact time when people need it because of the needs of the service, or something goes awry and it's just not put in place the way it was planned to be put in place. And in other places, they're not aware of the right thing to do. I absolutely agree that what we do, the culture of military, attracts the type of people who have strong values, and many of them. I'm not going to say all of them because I don't like to generalize, but many of them who are drawn to doing this are service-oriented people. They want to serve, they're loyal, they want to be strong, they want to help others. And the training and the way that people are brought together in their training just fosters that and works with that and uses it to make them even better at what they do. So that then when they can't fulfill that thing that they're trained for, and they can't be loyal and help the people around them or serve in the way that they want to serve, that to me, I've seen that. I've heard clinicians say that kind of what they call moral injury, or that kind of insult to what you wanted to be able to do and couldn't, is even more challenging to treat than the classic kind of PTSD symptoms. We also know that within PTSD, as Tom said, that that we've expanded the definition of what it is. In the last rendition of the diagnostic manual, we've included negative kinds of feelings about the world and ourselves, because it's so common that it should be in the diagnosis. It's not just about reacting to things or, you know, being hyper vigilant or having re-experiencing. It's also about this kind of negative kind of view of yourself or the world. And that kind of feeling is much more subtle, as you said, and much more pervasive in many different ways, including in relationships. It also underscores the importance to me of social support and how important it is to be with people who have been through similar experiences. Because as you said, in that transition back, one of the most jarring things that I've seen is the lack of understanding that people have for what you've just experienced, unless they've been through something similar themselves. So I'll stop there, but I think all the points you made are exactly right, Tom.
Yeah, especially these days. And I think the military, and obviously us as a nation, learned a lot from Vietnam. My father was a Vietnam veteran, and three of his brothers, two of my grandfathers were in World War II. So we've learned a lot there, but then also we've learned a lot over the years of some of the things that happened, like coming back from the Gulf War. Like Tom said, I was in Bosnia way back in the last century, and the same kind of thing. It was like pick up and move on. But also, like Patricia said, the resources are there, but also the individuals need to be able to take advantage, or willing to take advantage of the resources. I remember coming back from Afghanistan and going through, we have this process where we have to check all the blocks and answer all the questions. And towards the end of the day, and I'm there, and it's this long process, and the person looks at my paper and they said, "You seem pretty angry." And I was like, "I just got back from Afghanistan and I'm about to take over a company as a first sergeant. Anger is pretty much what I do," right? So, and they were like, "Do you want to go see somebody?" "No." "Give me my stamp and let me go," right? So it's one of those things where the idea of the resources need to be able to be there when the individual needs them, but also when the individual wants them. And I think that's one of the things that really came out in the comic is the word PTSD is never mentioned. The word suicide is never mentioned. These things, I mean, and yet it comes across so clearly. But Scarlett's angry, like she is pissed off throughout all the way up, I think probably until the last couple of panels, that she's angry at Roger, but she's sad about Roger, obviously. She's angry at her therapist. She's angry at her buddy. I mean, so just the way that this portrays the different nuances of how things happen when we come back. And then also the persistence of, Duke never writes her off. He never hangs up on her. Kenny, the therapist, doesn't just let her storm out and never, go get back in contact. It's this idea of no matter how many elbows are thrown, no matter how many tables are flipped over, we got to stick with veterans to be able to be there whenever they're finally ready to get the support.
I mean, that's a good point. Having the resources available and then being willing to use the resources. I mean, do you have recommendations for family members who might see somebody suffering and how they can approach helping that person seek help?
So one of the things that I often do is actually the VA has a great program called Coaching into Care. The family members know, right? They know often before the service member does. I came back and I had a 15-month tour in Iraq, and then 12 and a 9-month in Afghanistan. And my mother-in-law saw it, my wife saw it, but even before I did, right? It's one of those things that over time, it just sort of gradually lives with us. And then they're like, "Oh, I came back changed." But it's one of those things where the family needs to be able to be comfortable talking about it, but also have the service member, the veteran, to be able to be ready for that. And that's really, I think, one of the things that was shown in the issue really well. There's a lot of things that were shown really well, and a lot of the things that are shown that are critical to suicide prevention, like in the first page or two, Duke disarming the weapon that is sitting out, right? I mean, that is classic, appropriate reduction of lethal means and access to lethal means. But the VA's Coaching into Care program, there's I believe they partner with Psych Armor, and there's some different parts available to it, but those things that are available for veterans, the National Suicide Crisis Line, press 1 for veterans. family members can access that too. And so it's a lot of the resources that are there for veterans. The VA also has support for the family members.
That's wonderful. That's great to know.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. One of the projects that I was really pleased to be able to work on was a self-care and peer support model that we originally rolled out with Navy and Marine Corps called Stress First Aid. But we've also applied it to, through Psych Armor, we applied it to caregivers and family members of veterans with PTSD. So we created a course on their website. And what I was really impressed with, because I interviewed a number of different family members, some of whom were veterans themselves and some who weren't. And I was very, very impressed with the level of empathy that they had, and that was what they led with, that they were able to have conversations with veterans about not saying you need to get into care over and over again, because that's what the veterans often want to hear. That can be irritating to them if they're not ready, but more having conversations about, look, here's what I'm seeing. Here are the patterns I'm seeing. I'm concerned. How can we help you? Like, what do you need? And I saw some beautiful examples, and we tried to fold them into the course of ways that family members and caregivers would, call ahead to restaurants to find out how busy they're going to be, and can we sit in the corner with our back to the wall. With parties, can we arrive first and be able to sit somewhere that's comfortable, and is it okay if we leave early? And so they would do all kinds of things to try to adjust where a person might be getting reminded of things that were hard for them, or to just be there for the person in multiple different ways. And I also saw that one of the things that was very critical for them was to reach out and try to find other family member support networks, so that they could also have somebody who they could talk with about, problem solving or brainstorming, and just being able to vent themselves about what it's like to be in this kind of situation. So absolutely, I think if family members have empathy, and if they also can find ways to work with and show support, and also be open themselves about what they need, it seems to be really helpful in moving the person closer to getting help that they need, both within the family and outside of the family.
It's really great. Paul, it's obviously such an important and powerful story. Did you get reaction from anybody, from readers about it?
I did, yeah. Thankfully, most of the reaction seems to have been positive, ranging from people who are in the military community who said, showed their appreciation for the story. I know that sounds arrogant of me to say that, but that's some of the reaction I got. To just rank and file readers who just said that they thought it was well done, well put together. So yeah, I think the reaction overall was extremely positive, and I was very nervous about it. So that was very, very gratifying to see that it seemed to have landed very well. And even people who were not fans of the previous issues. Some very pointed critics of my run were like, okay, this one's all right. So I was like, oh, okay, that's nice. So yeah.
Kind of think on that too. What's interesting is, obviously, in a military story, you would suspect you might find something about PTSD or that type of thing. But there's ways of presenting the same concerns and symptoms and issues in other genres. So I thought the TV show True Detective, the first season, did a really good job of depicting PTSD with the detectives. But we've done some things, I write the Turtles at IDW, and we've had some things where the Turtles have gone through some trauma, and they're ninjas or soldiers, and they have to deal with similar issues in their life. And you'll present a story, and you will have people from the military reach out to you and say, I really liked that story. I related to it because I have the same feelings based on my own real life circumstances, in the military, or any really trauma in somebody's past. And it shows me that there's a need for this type of storytelling. We kind of discussed that earlier, but people need to see themselves and I think it's that kind of storytelling is maybe a more proactive type of empathy, I guess, where you are reaching out to people with these stories. It doesn't have to be a military story, but a story about people like them going through trauma and having to adjust. One of the things I will say about the VA is when, back in the early 90s when I came back from Desert Storm, it was very much at that time still what the stereotypical bureaucratic red tape, hurricane that you would have to go through. And a lot of times for people in the military, we like things, the old KISS, keep it simple, stupid acronym. Well, everything has an acronym, from cleaning your weapon to firing your weapon to how you fold your t-shirts. Everything, there's an acronym for everything. And that's how a lot of people in the military like that structure. They like that direction. And then all of a sudden you go to something like the VA back in those days, and it was just, you couldn't even navigate it. You didn't even want to try. And it was already, everything was overwhelming. That was 10 times more overwhelming than anything you had been dealing with prior to that while you were serving. Over the years, definitely, like I said, I went back into the National Guard later, and just knowing some people, the VA has become a lot more streamlined, and they're finding ways to make that stuff a little simpler for people to reach out, not just for PTSD, but things like just benefits. A lot of people in the military didn't understand what benefits they did or didn't have after they got out. So you tend to just go, well, forget it. I just don't want to deal with that. And now you don't have to deal with it in a complicated way. And then it really behooves each individual service member or former service member to reach out to somebody and get that information. But it's like an addiction type of thing. An addict is not going to stop until they, no matter how many people are trying to help them, unless they want to do it, it's just not going to happen. A service member, whether it's PTSD or just finding out what benefits they rate, it's not going to happen until you step forward. And I think making that first step easier for the person is huge. That's monumental. And then from there, things just will take care of themselves as they will. And there is a path.
It's great that. Oh, go ahead.
Talking about that reaction, and maybe Paul won't toot his horn, but I have heard from a whole lot of veterans that this is actually absolutely spot on. It landed exactly. It may not be a surprise to my colleagues in the clinical mental health community aren't big comics readers, but I share this, and some of them, and including myself, are actually using this in therapy, right? Because this is a therapeutic tool to be able to say, you're not alone in this, right? This is something like, heck, G.I. Joe's going through it, you can go through it. So it's extremely normalizing. And I've had a lot of veterans come out and say, this issue specifically really spoke to them in a huge way. A lot of veterans who don't read comics say that this is exactly right. I think that almost universally, both from my colleagues in the mental health field and also from veterans and my own clients, say that the feedback on this issue is absolutely great.
That's awesome. And I was going to say, it's great that it has that resource guide at the end of the comic. And I believe it's still available for free on IDW's website.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, throughout the month of September, yes.
That's really awesome. It's a great way to spread the word.
Yeah, I feel like it was particularly important in that it not only normalized PTSD, but it normalized the support for PTSD, getting support and people supporting each other. Because, and as you said, that there are movies, going way back about PTSD, but the illustrating the process of normalizing that it's okay to reach out and get support for this, and that it's the war within. I love that, because for me, what we've seen in the peer support with both service members and veterans is just, understanding that the different types of strength that are involved in being a service member and veteran are multitudes of different types of strength. And this is one type of strength, which is trying to recover from things that have happened, both physically and emotionally and mentally. And it's a type of strength that, in the same way as going to a doctor for, repairing your knee, people are often trying to just do it on their own. Well, I can handle it on my own. And really, you couldn't necessarily give yourself surgery in the same type of way. Getting support from others is going to be the way to get through this for many people. And so I loved the fact that it normalized that and made it more matter of fact, that it's just a part of the process. So thank you.
I also want to thank everybody because, I mean, Paul, when I first got the manuscript and, we had asked you to work with Duane and Patricia to make sure that things were accurate, et cetera. And, wasn't really sure what I was going to get. And I have to say, I literally had to walk out of my office at one point reading that manuscript because I was literally overwhelmed with emotion from it. And I remember bumping into a colleague and it was one of those, I'm not crying, you're crying, shut up.
Is it smoky in here?
And, it's just, at that moment, I knew we had something really special. And, the idea that, you work on things like this your whole life and you hope that you reach people. And when you realize that you are, and, people reach out and say, like the letters that you've gotten and some of the feedback, it's why you get into this line of work in the first place. And so it's incredibly rewarding and humbling at the same time. So appreciate it.
That's really great. I know we have to wrap up soon, so I just wanted to thank everyone for participating. It's a really important topic, and as a big fan of comics, I'm really glad that comics can be used in this way to help people in need. So thank you very much for your time, everybody. And thanks to everyone who's watching from home. Appreciate it.